Hi, I'm Hunter Parrish. I'm here to talk to y'all about like what KAFs are, how we should write KAFs and what they look like. One of the primary things is that critical AFs are not hyper different than like regular critiques. So like a big thing that to start is that like there's going to be a basic critique overview. That video is probably a good prior start to this video. That will give you good baseline information where you can then come to this video and understand more of what we're doing. Because ours is going to be the general question of like how can you like critically engage with a resolution. So first, starting on, a good basis to have is the idea that for critiques, there is three main models for how you can be critically engaging with a resolution. These three models are all going to be structured very differently, and in these different structures, you can then understand like where you're going with the critique, what you should be saying, and how you're going to do some basic T preempts, because T preempts should probably be in your KAF. That is the number one argument you'll see. The second one being the K versus K debate, but that's for a different video. So the first way we should be engaging with this is a question of the debate space is problematic. By understanding the debate space is problematic, you can then engage with a question of what should we be doing and how do we implicate ourselves through the K affirmative. As a basic overview, the argumentation that I read the most, both on KAFs and neg-Ks, is settler colonialism. So we'll be using that as a general example, though that does not mean that settler colonialism is the only way to reject an affirmative. That would be silly. There's many other good ways to do it. You can do it with feminist literature, queer literature, capitalist literature, anti-black literature, etc. Now, one of the first things that you should be engaging with, and whenever you say the debate space is problematic, is on your framework, you need to be establishing what the debate space is, as well as the intersection between the debate space and your literature. So like for regards to settler colonialism, you can construct how academia itself is colonial and how this academia justifies a certain kind of colonial process. This is then intersects with the debate space because we use this academia in the debate space, which then constructs the debate space as a place of like, say, a settler echo chamber. This framework establishes what debate is, what literature you're going to be reading, and how they intersect, which then gets you into the links. The links would have two jobs in this for this kind of KAF. The first would be critiquing the resolution. The resolution we're going to use to help engage in this process as another just constant example for us to work with. It's just going to be a basic gun control. The United States federal government should substantially increase gun control in the United States. That creates a good basis for like what we can question. So then for this resolution, a good one would be like Native Americans not having access to guns makes it, where they aren't able to defend themselves as well. This is, truly heinous when you see like missing Native American women rates in like, Northwest, things like that. This makes like self-defense crucial for these populations. This is a good resolutional analysis, but this then does not do the work of then like implicating the debate space again. A good settler colonial link would be the argument that like some people have like come from colonized families, and by making them relive this violence and defend this violence on the affirmative, it implicates the debate space in a process of colonization. This then lets you get into your impacts. The impacts for these kinds of Ks are going to be less about just like hardcore what the literature is saying. It's going to be much more proximal. It's going to be things like, if cultural genocide is the thesis of like what settler colonialism does, then the proximal would be that the debate space is actively killing cultures and how it engages in making you read topical affirmatives. This then leads you to the alternative. The alternative is going to usually look at one of two ways. Either it's going to propose a new method of debate. So for example, for the affirmative, it might be, obviously not having colonial resolutions, but it might be something like engaging in storytelling as a constructive method for how you should do knowledge production, or whatever other method you want to do. While the other way you could read an alternative is like collapse debate. Debate is intrinsically bad. This affirmative is like maybe terminally not fair, and it being not fair means we collapse debate and we all leave this space. Like that kind of pessimistic view of this argument could also work. Lastly, for T preempts, you should probably engage in the process of like the T is forcing you to defend a resolution, which then doesn't let you critique the debate space, and it maintains the same violence in the debate space. You could call it a form of normative policing, for example. The second form of KAFs you're going to see is just a basic reject the resolution. These are the most common and also the most simple, a good place to start. The framework is mostly just going to be like the literature base and like how the literature engages. It's going to construct what you define as colonialism. It's going to, for at least the colonial example, like what is colonialism? How do these structures exist? Are they ontological, epistemological? These kinds of questions. And then from this framework question, you then get into your links where you indict the resolution, bring down the argument. We said that for on the link page, it would just be like gun control is bad. You might not have to implicate the rest of the debate space because you're not saying debate is bad. You're just saying that this resolution is uniquely violent. The impact then gets to be much more literature-based because you're not necessarily doing something like on a pre-fiat level where you're questioning what happens in the space with our education, et cetera. It can all be post-fiat, which case you can say things like cultural genocide, gratuitous violence against Native Americans, literal genocide, depending on whatever you're reading with the links and the impacts. And then lastly, on the alternative, the alternative would be much more literature-based. The example for settler colonialism the obvious example is like give the land back, though. There's a multitude of ways this can be read. And then lastly, for the T preempt, you would just say that this would tie you to a harmful resolution. If the resolution is uniquely bad, then you shouldn't engage with it. Another T preempt, this works on all of them, but I think it is unique to the reject resolution, is specifically saying that like if the topic is just like poorly written, for example, it is non-inherent, or it is like not how like actual politics work, because like these resolutions are written by people like us, so they are made sometimes with mistakes, then you can always just say you should reject the resolution, even if it was a good hypothetical idea. It is so unrealistic. There is no education or fair research that can be done on it that can actually give its way to a topical affirmative. The last way to kind of read a KAF is a little bit different. It would be to read the topic critically. So the framework would then do the literature base, but then it would talk about one of two methods of doing this. These two methods construct two different ways you could read the topic, or you could read the critique topically, but the one would be like reformism is good, radical reformism is good. These kinds of radical reforms are crucial to really pushing up and really solving for these issues through the state. While the second one would be like on a pre-fiat level, imagining radical policy is good because this imagination can create, survival spaces, or this radical imagination is maybe good to then like decolonize our minds and then allow us to engage it. I say decolonize, but once again, whatever, K literature you're reading. On the links, you would then critique the resolution, but it wouldn't be pessimistic. You could talk about like gun control being needed to like defend, for example, Native Americans, but you wouldn't say that all gun control is like racist and impossible. You would just say that how it's been implicated is, but the state can do better. The impact would be much more resolutional. So like, for example, the links we talk about like, missing Native women in the Northwest, you would then make that the terminal impact. You would say there's a unique violence here in how guns are like not able to be put in the hands of Native Americans because of, gun control policy. This leads to, this unique form of violence. It is very directly tied to the resolution. The alternative would then be something topical. So like if you're doing the critical settler colonial topical affirmative, it would be something such as like ban settlers from owning guns. This then creates a radical imagining. You can either defend the post-fiat implication where you say, this is the plan, it is a good plan, it solves for our impacts by making gun control no longer colonial, or you can read it pre-fiat where you're saying, even if we don't pass this plan, we say this imagining is good because it decolonizes our knowledge and all of this. Lastly, the T preempt would be like, we are topical, we're increasing gun control. There's nothing that says we shouldn't be able to specify. These different ways of envisioning KAFs are always going to be crucial because the different forms of KAFs are probably the basis for how you should understand Ks, because there needs to be a question of why are you rejecting the resolution? Are you rejecting the resolution because you want to create a new model of debate because debate itself is flawed? 2, because the resolution is uniquely bad, so you're just rejecting it to do something less violent. Or 3, you're not rejecting the resolution, you're just reading it in a way that allows you to critically question what it is doing, either by imagining a much better world or saying that this would actually be a good policy and we're going for it. With all of that, those are probably the different ways to do KAFs and the different ways KAFs can appear within the debate space. This is not a comprehensive way to do it because, once again, KAFs are probably the most creative place you can engage in debate. Since you are starting from literally no starting point, you get to do whatever you want. This gives you a lot of freedom, but this is to say that these are probably the most common outlines you'll see, and understanding it in these ways then gives you frameworks to understand what are you wanting to do with your KAFs. With that, thank you very much for watching. I hope you have the rest of your day. Yeah.